One of the most unique things about investing in Palantir is that it is first and foremost a defense contractor. The relationships they've been able to build within the government, the contracts they've been able to sustain, and the ability for them to offer real-time value on the battlefield and anywhere else that the government needs it has been nothing short of phenomenal. In fact, some people that I've talked to have said, given the moat that Palantir has within the governmental space, and we know those government revenues are very sticky and essentially unlimited, even in bad times like a recession, because the government never stops spending money, especially on defense, that commercial is just a cherry on top to what Palantir can do. And if commercial is a cherry on top and there's so much growth left to happen in commercial, then what are you investing in when you're investing in the government business? Well, you're investing in a very unique business that has a unique differentiated capability to deliver value. One would argue a monopolistic way of delivering value, given other companies can't do what they're doing. And you're getting a company that is always going to have sticky revenues that the US government probably is not going to let fail because the US government relies on Palantir so much. Well, a lot of VCs, venture capitalists, are starting to realize the potential of defense tech. And if you've ever listened to Alex Karp, the CEO of Palantir, speak, one of the things he's been very, quite frankly, prophetic on is this idea that the United States is in a unique opportunity where it has the best software capability, the best software edge on any country in the world, because all of the best companies come from the United States. It's not to say there aren't great and amazing technology companies across the world, but the far majority of them are founded, incubated, and started within the United States and then expanded across the world. As a result of that, defense is no different. Some of the best defense technology companies are built in the United States, and they give de facto the United States an advantage. And if the United States has an advantage, then NATO has an advantage, the West has an advantage, and if you believe in freedom, democracy, all those things, then obviously that is a good thing. This article came out by the Financial Times today, and I thought this was an incredible article. They mentioned Palantir, and they overall mentioned the market opportunity for where this defense technology spend is ultimately going. Silicon Valley chiefs urge Pentagon procurement overhaul. An open letter was designed to apply pressure on U.S. government to open up the $886 billion defense budget to startups. Now, it's funny because the picture they use, the thumbnail they use for this is literally Palantir's SkyKit. One of the things that's interesting before we get into this article is that VCs are starting to recognize defense technology is important. What was the catalyst for this? Honestly, Russia, Ukraine, the potential conflict that's going to happen with China and Taiwan, overall a deglobalized society that is getting more and more tension, more and more insecure, and more unstable, is starting to let the VCs, which are the venture capitalists that fund a lot of these startups that go on to become billion-dollar companies. At one point, Palantir was just a startup before it became the company that it is today, to start working on some of these innovative problems in a unique, differentiated way from the rest of the world. And we've covered on previous videos that VCs are betting a lot of money towards the course of $17 billion on defense tech. Now, the rest of the world is starting to recognize that this is a real opportunity, this is a real market, and if there's money flowing into this market, and the DoD starts opening up the defense budget just a little bit more in terms of software, because less than 1% of their spend is actually on software, then this can be a very, very big market opportunity for Palantir. Let's get into this, and we'll discuss the implications for it in a little bit. Founders and investors of Silicon Valley defense technology companies have urged the U.S. government to overhaul the way it procures military systems from private groups, warning in an open letter that the country risks rapidly losing ground on the technological battlefield. I do not think this is fear-mongering. I do think Russia and China are working on a lot of different technologies, and, you know, in those places, freedom and sort of the freedom of the press, democracy, that stuff's not valued. So whatever technology they're creating, you can already assume de facto that it has a bias built within it to favor the government or to favor some type of regime that may not be the best for the world. So if Russia and China have a technological advantage or could have a technological advantage, I think it's very important for the United States to take this letter seriously. The letter, sent to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin on Friday, was signed by marquee venture capital firms that have invested hundreds of millions of dollars into the fledgling defense tech companies over recent years. The signatories include Lux Capital, Kleiner Perkins, and General Catalyst. These are three of the biggest venture capital firms in the world. Fun fact, I have my own startup, Audia.io, and I actually met and I got to I would say second or third meeting with it wasn't a second round of meetings, but it was a second or third meeting with General Catalyst. So it was pretty cool to be able to talk to these guys. They manage billions of dollars. Ultimately, they didn't invest in my startup. Hopefully one day when we get a little bit bigger. But these are very, very big names in the defense space, or just in the startup ecosystem in general. As well as some of the heads of the most valuable startups in the sector, such as Anduril, Palantir, and Applied Intuitions. Obviously, Palantir is not a startup anymore, so that's a typo by Financial Times. But you could argue they are a startup in so many different industries because they've yet to really get to that inflection point. The move is an attempt to apply further pressure on the government to open up its huge Pentagon budget worth $886 billion for 2024 to startups backed by leading Silicon Valley investors. The letter suggests that the government's process for buying military technology was antiquated and had drastically limited It's access to cutting-edge defense and weapon systems. While most critical technologies being developed today reside in the commercial sector, they are not being leveraged at the speed and scale required for us to maintain advantage relative to our competitors. The signatories propose a series of recommendations for reforming defense procurement, such as $20 billion in additional spending towards corporate research and development projects, and the creation of a $250 million bridge fund to help companies further develop technology that has been proved to work. It said adopting these changes will dramatically improve the ability for the Silicon Valley to deliver the world's best technologies to the warfighter. Venture capital investment into defense tech companies is boomed in recent years as the war in Ukraine and geopolitical tensions with China, which we talked about above, have fueled hopes that the U.S. government will give contracts to startups producing innovative systems. U.S. investment in defense startups surged from less than $16 billion in 2019 to $33 billion in 2022, and we can see where the spend has gone. Obviously, it's a trend that's moving upwards. In 2023, so far, we've done $17 billion, which is just about half of the $33 billion we've done in 22, about halfway into the year. As many as 6 defense tech unicorns, startups valued at more than $1 billion, have emerged from the flood of funding. Shield AI, Hawkeye 360, Anduril, Rebellion Defense, Palantir is obviously not a startup, and Epirus. The companies provide the U.S. military with technology ranging from AI-powered fighter pilots and automated drones to satellite mapping. However, large government contracts of the scale required to manufacture complex systems remain rare. Many startups have failed due to the long gap dubbed the Valley of Death between developing a prototype and being awarded a government contract. Now, this is where I wanted to talk about what this means for Palantir. I'll leave the rest of the article in the description. It's about 3 more paragraphs, but that was the core point I wanted to get across. How does this relate ultimately to Palantir? If defense spending goes up, there are 2 ways that Palantir benefits, especially in the software space. Number 1, they're going to get more contracts. If it goes from 1% of the DoD budget of that $886 billion to 2%, maybe 3%, 4% over the next couple of years, that money is going to flow, and we're talking about billions and billions of dollars, into the most innovative solutions, the best solutions. And again, money is not that much of an object for the government because they've got billions of dollars. They want to make sure that thing gets done. And, in the words of Coatstrap, they would rather make sure they spend 50 cents more than have someone die, right? So in that case, you don't want to be the guy that picks a crappy piece of software simply because you want to penny pinch when you have an unlimited budget. Fueled by taxpayers. So if that's the case, Palantir is primed to be able to get more of those contracts. Palantir is primed to be able to be in the running, at least for a lot of those contracts, no matter where they're going, whether they're the CDC, Department of Defense, Army, etc., because Palantir has ties to all of those people. Number 2, and I think here's, this is a video I did a while ago, but this also makes a lot of sense. Palantir just introduced FedStart. And FedStart is their program to allow their accreditation of IL6, which only they, Microsoft, and Amazon have, so 2 companies in the world, or 3 companies in the world, to be able to go to other tech startups that are building software protocols that require some level of security and accreditation because they don't have the IL level 5, 6 that Palantir does. So if defense spending increases and we've got tens of billions of more dollars going into these startups because the U.S. government is taking a chance on some of these people. And, by the way, the U.S. government takes chances all the time on a lot of these companies. You might as well take chances on companies that are showing some level of growth and progress and innovative solutions in the United States. I mean, those are the companies you want to take chances on by giving them potential contracts for them to work on to procure software. And a lot of these times, these startups are way more advanced than legacy companies, even if they're not perfect companies, even if they make mistakes, even if there's some screw ups here or there. The innovation in regards to the software they're able to provide is likely better than what some of the legacy people can provide. That's just the nature of how innovation works. If that's the case, a lot of those startups are going to need software that also keeps them secure, keeps them compartmentalized in a way that allows the government to be able to see where the data is going, how the data is being accessed, etc. And that's where Palantir's FedStart program comes in. So if Palantir can leverage their unique software, basically as a container, as they mentioned, for a lot of these other companies looking to get into these government contracts, which again can be a very lucrative business, but the only way it's lucrative is if you know the right people and you can get the job done. And the appetite for defense spending on software also increases. Well, if that's the case, I can see Palantir being utilized in a couple ways. Number 1, Foundry or AIP can actually be a back-end architecture, or even Apollo at that case, for a lot of these companies, potentially even Gotham if it can integrate with a startup in a meaningful way. So their software can actually be licensed to some of these startups that are building defense technology. It can just mix in with Palantir software. And then 2, their software can be a container for a lot of these other software companies that don't have IL level 5 or IL level 6 accreditation, and Palantir can containerize their software so that they have the ability to even sell to the government, because first and foremost, if the data is not protected, if the data is not confidential, the government will never buy your software, right? Because then there's a potential security breach. This means that if defense technology is increasing, and it's increasing because VCs are starting to spend more on these companies, and as a result of that, they're sending these letters to the government, which is compelling the government to say, hey, If you don't want to end up like some of the stuff that's going on elsewhere in the world and you want to retain our competitive advantage, this is what we as leaders of companies are recognizing is the biggest problem. Is that we're not taking enough chances on some of these innovative companies. We're not giving enough contracts to the startups that are doing stuff that is actually cool, not like just protecting legacy IT infrastructure because we have past relationships with them. We're not procuring meritocratically. And this is, again, what Palantir sued the government. I believe they sued the Army back in, I think, 2011, because they believed that a lot of these contracts were being given, particularly for software, from a political basis. I know that guy, therefore I know that guy, therefore the contract comes, which still goes on today, right? There's politics and everything. But as long as there is some level of meritocracy in, okay, that software is objectively better. No prior relationship I have can, get me to give this $100 million to this person when that software is getting the job done, especially if that software is saving lives. Then you got to go with a software that actually works. You got to go with the company that actually gets the job done. So if defense tech spending is going up on the private investment side and government officials are being more, at least they're starting to be lobbied, you could argue, by a lot of these people, these VC firms to look into this more seriously, that is a positive sign for Palantir. Now, a lot of people may say, well, wait a second, these people have their own agenda. They want to make their money. That's why they want the government to spend. They don't care that much. Sure, that may be the case. The problem is two things. Number one, that's inevitable, right? If you have an interest in your company getting certain contracts, you are going to compel the decision maker of those contracts to look into these companies. Number two, is there a reason for why that actually matters? And I think given what we're seeing going on across the entire world, it is very real that the United States, if we take our foot off the gas, can lose our competitive edge on software, especially in the defense technology space, if we're not spending on it. I mean, here's a classic example that I think will resonate with a lot of people. Space exploration. NASA has really not done anything special until they landed on the moon, right? Because the US government started underfunding it. We didn't see the value in it, didn't see the security, et cetera, et cetera. Then we had countries all across the world do way more cooler stuff in space. The only reason the United States has a slight advantage over some of the other countries is because of SpaceX. Is because of Elon Musk, right? We had private enterprises step up. I don't know if SpaceX got any governmental subsidies. I'm sure they have. I could be wrong on this. So if you could tell me in the comments, that would be awesome. But what I do know is Elon Musk got $470 million from the government for Tesla, I think back in 2010. And that was a loan given to Tesla. Tesla was able to pay back that loan. On the Olin podcast I was listening to recently over the weekend, they mentioned something interesting. What if the government had a little bit of an equity stake in Tesla? What if they de facto acted as a VC fund for Tesla? And they're the biggest VC fund in the world because they have all the world's money. You don't take out 50 bets hoping one becomes the next Instagram. But if Tesla's very promising, you've got a once-in-a-lifetime generation entrepreneur like Elon, you give him $465 million and you get a little bit of equity. That equity would have 200x today. And so it's just very interesting to kind of see that the government has placed strategic bets before. Not all of them work. But if they were to take some more strategic bets on a company that could be the next Palantir, like they did 20 years ago when they incubated Palantir, the CIA's venture capital firm, then that is overall good for the space. That is overall good for America's competitive dominance. That is overall good for Western values being secure. And that is overall good for software that has actual values built into it, not software that can be manipulated by totalitarian regimes to remain the software that wins at the end of the day. So I think Palantir can benefit from this in both ways. And, if defense technology is going to be increasing in the future, and companies like Anduril that are just amazing companies, I'm working on a video on them a little bit later and talking about their relationship with Palantir, are going to be getting these contracts, and Palantir is powering some of their back-end infrastructure as well. Well, you've got a lot more money flowing into Palantir as a result of that. So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think about the defense technology moat that Palantir has. Thanks so much for listening and watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.